One family you've never heard of controls more African wealth than entire countries combined. Their net worth? A staggering $5 trillion. That's more than the GDP of every African nation except two. But here's what makes this truly shocking. They operate in complete silence, their names absent from Forbes lists, their faces unknown to the public. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal who they really are, how they built an empire that spans 54 countries, and the 3 devastating ways they're reshaping Africa's economic future right now. Let me show you exactly how this happened. When most people think of Africa's wealth, they picture diamond mines in South Africa or oil fields in Nigeria. They imagine individual billionaires like Aliko Dangote or Nicky Oppenheimer. But they're missing the biggest player in the room. This family doesn't own just one industry. They own pieces of almost everything. Banks, telecommunications, mining operations, real estate, and even the infrastructure that entire nations depend on. Their influence stretches from Cairo to Cape Town, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. What makes them different from typical wealthy families is their strategy. While other billionaires seek fame and recognition, this family has perfected the art of invisible control. They operate through hundreds of shell companies, trusts, and proxy organizations. Their wealth has been accumulated over 5 generations, carefully hidden behind layers of legal structures that make them nearly impossible to track. The most surprising part? You've probably used their services today without even knowing it. That phone call you made, the money you transferred, the news you read, there's a good chance they profited from it. Now here's where things get really interesting. The family I'm talking about doesn't actually exist as a single bloodline. That's the first shock. When I say family, I'm referring to a network of approximately 40 interconnected families that function as one economic unit. These are the descendants of colonial-era administrators, traders, and settlers who never really left Africa after independence. Instead, they transformed. In the 1960s, as African nations gained independence, something unexpected happened. While everyone celebrated freedom, these families were making deals behind closed doors. They negotiated contracts that gave them century-long rights to resources, infrastructure, and essential services. In Kenya alone, 3 families control 62% of private land ownership. In South Africa, 5 families still own 72% of agricultural land 60 years after apartheid's supposed end. But land is just the beginning. The real power lies in what you can't see. Take telecommunications. Every time someone in West Africa makes a mobile payment, uses mobile data, or sends money home, a fraction of that transaction flows to companies controlled by this network. We're talking about billions of microtransactions daily. One company alone processes over 400 million mobile transactions every single day across 14 African countries. The math is staggering. If each transaction generates just 1 cent in profit, that's $4 million daily, or $1.46 billion yearly, from just one subsidiary of one company in the network. Now multiply that across banking, telecommunications, utilities, and transportation. The numbers become almost incomprehensible. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. The control extends far beyond business into something more fundamental: debt. This network has perfected a modern form of economic colonialism through strategic lending and infrastructure development. Here's how it works. African governments need to build roads, ports, hospitals, and power plants. They need billions in financing. Traditional lenders like the World Bank often come with strict conditions and long approval processes. Enter these families and their investment firms. They offer faster funding with fewer visible strings attached. Sounds helpful, right? But here's the catch. The contracts include clauses that give these companies first rights to profits from the infrastructure for decades. In Mozambique, a port built with this model generates $890 million in annual revenue. The government receives just 18% after all contractual obligations. The remaining 82% flows to the private operators, companies owned by the network. This same pattern repeats across the continent. A toll road in Nigeria, a telecommunications tower in Tanzania, a power plant in Ghana. Each project creates a revenue stream that lasts generations. The total annual cash flow from these infrastructure assets: Conservative estimates put it at over $340 billion yearly across the continent. But there's another layer that's even more disturbing. Many of these families also control the consulting firms that African governments hire to evaluate which projects to pursue and which companies to contract with. It's the ultimate conflict of interest. They're essentially recommending their own companies for projects, then profiting from those same projects for decades. In 2019, an investigation in Uganda revealed that 14 of 18 infrastructure projects approved in the previous decade were awarded to companies with direct ties to two consulting firms, both controlled by families in this network. The pattern appears across multiple countries. Additionally, this network has embedded itself into African politics through what they call economic diplomacy. They fund think tanks, sponsor university programs, and provide free economic advisory services to government officials. Several current African presidents have former employees of network companies in their cabinets. It's not corruption in the traditional sense. It's something more sophisticated, the gradual integration of private interests into public decision-making until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. The ultimate goal of this network isn't just wealth extraction. It's permanent economic dependency. Documents leaked in 2023 from a network strategy meeting revealed a chilling long-term plan called the Century Framework. This framework outlines a coordinated strategy to ensure African nations remain structurally dependent on network services for the next 100 years. Here's the final twist that changes everything. You're part of this system. If you've invested in index funds, retirement accounts, or hold stock in major international companies, you're likely an indirect beneficiary of this network's African operations. The largest shareholders in network companies are pension funds, mutual funds, and institutional investors from North America, Europe, and Asia. Your retirement might be partially funded by African wealth extraction. This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. The system is so vast and integrated that almost everyone participates without knowing. That's what makes it so effective and so difficult to change. The network isn't evil individuals in a secret room. It's a structural system that perpetuates itself because it's profitable for millions of people worldwide. But awareness creates possibility for change. When enough people understand how the system works, pressure builds for reform. Already, some investment funds are asking harder questions about where African profits come from and whether extraction models are sustainable long-term. Some network companies are being forced to renegotiate contracts as public awareness grows. The hidden family worth $5 trillion isn't really hiding anymore. Information leaks, investigative journalism, and digital activism are pulling back the curtain. The question now is what happens next. Will the network adapt to demands for fairer wealth distribution? Will African nations successfully build alternative systems? Or will the Century Framework succeed in locking in another 100 years of economic dependency? The answers will shape not just Africa's future, but the global economy. Africa will soon have the world's largest workforce and fastest-growing consumer markets. Who controls that economic power will determine 21st century geopolitics. Remember what I said at the beginning. One family controls more African wealth than entire countries. Now you know the truth. It's not one family. It's a network of families, companies, and systems that have perfected invisible control. They've built a $5 trillion empire by being everywhere and nowhere, essential yet unknown. The real question is, now that you know, what will you do with this information? Because the greatest power any system has is making people believe it's natural, inevitable, or impossible to change. But nothing is permanent. Every system was built by people and can be rebuilt by people. The century-long framework has just begun. The next 75 years will determine whether it succeeds or whether Africa writes a different story. One thing is certain. This hidden empire won't stay hidden much longer. And when the full story emerges, it will change how we understand wealth, power, and control in the modern world. Thanks for watching. If this opened your eyes, share it. The more people who understand these systems, the harder they become to maintain. See you in the next one.